Welcome to Unspoken Affairs. Asterisk, it all started on an ordinary Tuesday. The house was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that's comforting, but the kind that presses in on you, making every creak of the floorboards sound louder than it should. The sun was already dipping behind the rooftops when I got home. Leaving the last streaks of daylight to fight with the shadows in the hallway, Mark's car was in the driveway. That meant he had gotten home early, which was unusual for him. Normally, he worked late shifts at the cafe down the street, dragging himself in just in time to collapse into bed. Seeing his car there, still gleaming faintly in the fading light, gave me pause. Mark was 21, young but not a kid. Old enough to handle life on his own, but still carrying the raw edges of someone figuring out where he belonged. On the surface, he carried himself with a quiet kind of confidence. He was polite, respectful, even charming when he wanted to be. But if you paid attention, if you really watched, you'd see the hesitation. The way he often paused before speaking, the way he avoided eye contact when conversations got personal. The way he seemed to retreat into himself whenever the world felt too sharp. I noticed these things. Maybe because I lived with him. Maybe because, in some way, I recognized parts of myself in him. I set my bag down by the door and slipped out of my shoes, the silence of the house almost swallowing the sound. That's when I heard it, the faint hum of running water upstairs. The shower. Nothing unusual about that, except something about it felt off. It was too quiet everywhere else to still. I stood there for a moment, straining my ears, telling myself I was overthinking it. But my feet carried me up the stairs anyway. The closer I got, the clearer the sound became. Water against porcelain, a faint rhythm, like hesitation. Then I noticed the bathroom door. It wasn't closed all the way. Just a crack, narrow but noticeable. That wasn't like Mark. He valued his privacy. If he was in the shower, the door would normally be shut, maybe even locked. Something inside me tightened. I hesitated, then cleared my throat softly. "Mark, everything okay?" The words hung in the air for a beat. Then the door creaked, just slightly, as my weight shifted on the floorboard. In an instant, Mark turned. His eyes widened, startled, like he'd been caught doing something he didn't want anyone to see. He was holding a towel, gripping it tightly, his knuckles pale against the fabric. "Oh, I didn't know you were home," he stammered. His voice cracked halfway through, unsteady in a way I wasn't used to hearing from him. I froze in the doorway, hands raised in instinctive apology. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. I just heard the water running and thought, I don't know, I thought something might be wrong." He blinked, his face flushed, his breathing shallow. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, almost as if his strength gave out all at once, he sat down heavily on the edge of the tub, shoulders slumped, head bowed. "It's kind of embarrassing," he muttered. His voice was so quiet, I almost didn't catch it over the hum of the water. I stepped a little closer, keeping my tone soft. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But sometimes it helps." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes fixed on the tiled floor. The silence stretched, broken only by the steady drip of water from the faucet. Finally, he exhaled shakily. "I've been dealing with stuff," he said. "I don't really know who else to talk to." Something in the way he said it cut straight through me. Mark wasn't the type to share icily. For him to admit even this much meant he was holding back something heavy. Something that had been eating at him for a while. "What is it?" I asked gently but firmly. He hesitated, then whispered, I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't know who I am. Some days I feel like I don't fit anywhere." The words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't about a bad day or a stressful week. This was deeper. This was about identity, about the confusion that comes when you're caught between adolescence and adulthood, trying to piece together who you are while the world keeps demanding answers you don't have. I swallowed, then spoke carefully. "There's nothing wrong with you, Mark. You're figuring things out. Nobody has all the answers at your age. Trust me, you're not weird. You're brave for even saying this out loud." For the first time, he looked up at me. His eyes were uncertain, but behind them I caught a flicker of something else. Hope, maybe? Or relief. His lips twitched into a faint, fleeting smile. I just didn't think anyone would understand, he admitted. Sometimes, I said softly, we don't give people enough credit. You'd be surprised how understanding they can be if you let them in. But you don't have to share with everyone. Just the right people. He nodded slowly, still gripping the towel like it was the only thing anchoring him. You really think so? I know, so, I said firmly. And I want you to know something. I'll always be here if you need to talk. For a long moment, the heaviness in the room eased. Not gone, but lighter, like the air itself had shifted, carrying away some of the weight he'd been holding alone. That was the first night. Mark opened the door to a part of himself he'd been hiding. But it wasn't the last. The days that followed felt different. On the surface, nothing had changed. Mark still left for work in the mornings, still came home late on most nights, still spent hours in his room with the door shut. But beneath that surface, something subtle was different. It was in the way he lingered a moment longer in the kitchen before heading upstairs. The way our eyes met over dinner, holding contact for a beat before he looked away. The way his voice, when he spoke, carried a vulnerability I hadn't noticed before. It was as if the crack in the door that night had left something open between us, and I found myself noticing things I hadn't before. How tired he looked when he thought no one was paying attention. How he sometimes started to say something, then stopped himself, swallowing the words like they weren't worth being spoken. How his laughter, when it came, felt forced, too sharp, too practiced. I thought about his words often. I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't know who I am. I remembered what it felt like to be 21. The confusion, the pressure. The way every decision felt like it was shaping the rest of your life, while at the same time you didn't even know who you were supposed to be. And I realized, maybe he wasn't just talking about himself. Maybe he was saying what so many people his age felt, but didn't have the courage to say out loud. That thought stayed with me. A few nights later, after our other roommate had gone to bed, I found Mark standing in the kitchen. The light above the stove was the only one on, casting a soft glow over the room. He was leaning against the counter, staring into a mug of tea that had long since stopped steaming. Couldn't sleep. I asked gently. He looked up startled, then shook his head. No, just thinking. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter across from him. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was waiting. Finally, he spoke. Can we talk? I nodded. Of course. What's on your mind? He shifted nervously from one foot to the other, like the words themselves were heavy. I've been feeling strange lately, lost, like I don't know who I'm supposed to be. His voice cracked at the end. He looked down, ashamed. That's not strange, Mark, I said softly. That's being human. You're not broken. You're just searching. And that's okay. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't want to be a burden. To you, to anyone. You're not a burden, I said firmly, leaning forward. You never will be. When things get tough, the people who care about you don't see you as a weight. They see you as family. His shoulders loosened. For the first time in days, I saw the tension leave his face. And in that moment, I knew this was only the beginning of his story.